Hello everyone, this is David Young with DIY Woodcarving, and today I'm going to be talking about how to start whittling as a hobby. Complete beginner, if you are just thinking, hey, I think I want to try whittling, it looks interesting, but I don't know where to start. It's a common question that I get, and that is what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to cover three things, give you everything you need to just get started. We're going to talk about what you need, how to whittle, and what to carve. And with those things, you can get started right away in this great hobby. I want to talk a little bit first about why would you want to start whittling? Well, it is just fun, right? There's something really satisfying about just taking that wood off. It's calming, it's stress reducing, it's just enjoyable. It's a great way to unplug, to disconnect, to make something with your hands. You get that satisfaction of making something, and it is just an enjoyable hobby, and it doesn't cost a lot. You don't need a lot of expensive equipment to get started. Really quick and easy to get started. And I wanted to share before we jumped in, these are a couple of my very first carvings, a few of my first carvings from about 6 years ago. And I was really proud of these carvings when I made them. Everybody's going to start somewhere, and that's okay. So start small. I've got some of my other carvings to give you an idea of the types of things that you can whittle. This is one of my most recent simple penguin designs. I love carving little plants. It's our succulent set that I created, and a little Christmas tree, little gnomes, flowers, right? All sorts of different things you can carve, and that's just exciting. So one other thing I want to mention is we're talking about whittling. So what do we mean by whittling versus wood carving? Well, I'm going to talk about how to get started whittling, because whittling is, in my mind, a subset of wood carving. There's a lot of different ways that you could carve wood in a lot of different styles, right? Whittling, there's not a set definition, but I would say that whittling is wood carving with just a knife and a piece of wood. Some people might define it a little bit differently, but I think that's the simplest way to think about it. So what I'm going to be talking about today is how do you start whittling with just a knife and wood. So let's get started. All right, so let's get started with what do you need to get started whittling? And the first thing that you're going to need is wood, right? You can't carve without wood. And so the short answer to this is I've got a big pile of basswood here, just pieces of basswood. And basswood is the most common wood that you will find for whittling or wood carving. That's because it's generally a pretty soft wood, pretty easy to carve. It's got a light, consistent color, and it's got a tight grain, which means that it'll hold details pretty well. Now, other woods that you might find that people might carve with, things like pine, poplar, aspen, birch, butternut. Those are all woods that tend to be a little bit easier to carve that you might find for carving. I would avoid things like maple or cherry or walnut. Might look really nice, but they're going to be, definitely harder to carve if you're just getting started out. Okay. And my recommendation would be that you buy wood that is being sold as carving wood. Wood that is being sold for the purpose of carving, because that means that it's been dried and cut and prepared for carving. And there's a few different ways to do that. So one way is to buy from carving stores, but of course it's difficult to find carving shops online or in town, so you have to order it online. It's not difficult to find them online. So most carving shops online are a good place to potentially order wood from. I would avoid buying it from like your local big box hardware store or hobby shop. You might find a little bag of carving wood there. Usually it's going to be really hard and maybe some awkward shapes and sizes. A little bit harder to get started with. You're welcome to try it, but it's likely not going to work great. And so your next question is going to be, well, what's the simplest way to buy wood? I'll put a couple links to some reputable online shops in the description, so you can go and shop for your own wood. But the simplest thing, if you're going to go out and buy wood on Amazon, that's what everybody's going to ask. And if you're going to buy wood on Amazon, then my recommendation would be this particular set of basswood carving wood from Beavercraft. Okay, and I like this set in particular because it's 16 pieces. You get a good amount of wood. It's about 20 bucks, so not super expensive for 16 pieces of 6-inch 1x1 basswood. Now, 1x1 is a great size if you're getting started. You can hold it in your hand easily. It's not too big, it's not too small. And any wood that you buy on Amazon is going to be a little bit hit or miss. I haven't tested everything, but I do find that for the price, for the convenience, if you're going to buy wood on Amazon, that this set in particular from Beavercraft tends to be pretty good and it'll carve pretty well. Okay. So that's it on wood. I was going to tell a joke about wood, but I couldn't think of one that would work. Sorry about that. That was a corny joke. So continuing on with what you need to get started whittling, next up we're going to look at a knife. You've already got wood, now you need a knife. I'm not going to mess around with any jokes here. We're just going to get straight to the point. Sorry, you're going to have to stay sharp to keep up. All right, so my first recommendation is that you get a knife that is a dedicated whittling knife. The reason for that is that your pocket knife is probably going to be made out of stainless steel, and stainless steel is going to be really great for corrosion resistance, for durability, but it's going to be harder to sharpen and harder to keep whittling sharp, we call it. And so if you're really, an expert at knife modification and sharpening, then by all means you can make your pocket knife work. And there are exceptions to this rule. But in general, if you're just getting started as a beginner, you're going to benefit a lot from having a knife that is made and sold for whittling. And what you're looking for, and what you'll usually find when you find that, is you're going to notice that these have straight cutting edges. And that's going to be a little bit easier to control, a little bit easier to keep track of where the cutting edge is at all times. They're also going to be very thin, definitely thinner than your average pocket knife blade, which is great because a thinner knife is going to just slide through the wood really easily without breaking it, without having trouble to get in there. And you're going to be able to make easier, deeper cuts with that. The other thing is it's probably going to come really, really sharp. And that's really important as a beginner so that you get that feeling of what a really sharp knife looks like or how it feels. So I have got a whole 20-minute long video on how to choose a knife, and there's lots of different options that you can think about, but I'm going to show you just a couple quick recommendations here to think about if you're getting started. The first one is this FlexCut KN13 whittling knife, and the benefit of these is that FlexCut is really easy to find and relatively cheap. So this is going to cost $20 to $25. You can get it on Amazon, but you can also find FlexCut in a lot of smaller woodworking shops and things like that. And it's got a 1.5-inch detail blade, a really good point for carving details, and big enough that you can make some good cuts off with it. It's easy to find, relatively cheap. It's going to be really sharp, and it's going to last you a good long time. So that's a great recommendation. If you say, I hear what you're saying about a pocket knife, but I really want a folding knife, then the cheapest FlexCut folding knife, it's still going to be about 35, 40 bucks, is this FlexCut detail jack. It has a very similar 1.5-inch detail blade. I like it because it locks and it's pretty secure in there. And it's going to carve very similarly to that FlexCut. So if you're like, I really want that folding knife feel, it's not a bad option to consider. Those are usually my top recommendation because for the price, it's just hard to beat, and they're the easiest to find. If you're looking for something that feels a little bit more custom, a little bit more handmade, this OCC Tools 1.5-inch carving knife usually costs about $30. You can find it not at Amazon or places like that, but you could find it pretty easily at online carving shops for about 30 bucks. You might have to pay for shipping, but it would be a really good knife that will last you a long time. A little bit of a step up for 30 bucks. I always recommend it as the first knife that I got really comfortable with carving and sharpening. And so Those are generally the knives that I would recommend if you're just getting started. And of course, there are other options you could consider. Now, if you say, I really need to save money, I don't want to spend $20 to $25 for this flex cut knife, and I'm looking at Amazon and I keep seeing these Beavercraft knives or other knives. This is a Beavercraft C8 detail knife. It's a 1.5 inch blade. It's a little bit wider, a little bit thicker than the flex cut one. So it's going to cut a little bit differently. It's not going to cut quite as far deeply into the wood, but it is going to be sharp and it'll give you that experience of getting started. If you really, really need a blade that's going to be about $12, maybe as low as 10 on sale sometimes, you can try that. I don't recommend, there's a whole flood of no-name brand knives that are shaped like this and look like this. I really don't recommend any of the other ones. And I do think that the flex cut one is a better option to get started if you can swing the 10 extra bucks. The other option to think about if you're really looking to save a few bucks would be to use a utility knife. So I got this one for about $6, I think, at a local hardware store. It folds out, it locks, but the nice thing about a utility knife is it has a really sharp blade and a really thin blade and a straight blade, just like I said we want for whittling. And a lot of people do whittle with a utility knife, and you'll see it carves really well, right? It's a little bit awkward because of the way that it's held in there. You're never going to be able to get too far up on it. You're going to start running into wherever it's connected, and you're never going to be able to push all the way through much further back. So you're a little bit restricted by it, but it'll give you that experience of what does it feel like to whittle with a really, really sharp knife for a low cost. So my only recommendation would be that if you do that, don't use those cheap plastic ones that come in tool sets. Buy one like this that is a little bit sturdier, holds the blade in pretty sturdy, maybe has a lock and things like that. But it's not a bad way to start for under 10 bucks if that's something that that you want to try. And another advantage is if it gets dull, you can swap the blade out and you don't have to worry as much about sharpening. So it's not a bad option if you're trying to just get started and see what it's like to whittle. Okay. All right. So that's it on knives. All right, so you've got your wood, you've got your knife, and you might be thinking, that's all I need. And technically, yeah, you can whittle with just knife and wood. But there's a couple other things that you should think about. And the first thing I would say is that if you're going to be whittling seriously, you should get a strop, even if you're whittling casually, because keeping your knife sharp is the most important thing and will lead to the most success. And a strop is how you're going to do that. I've got a whole video on strop, so I'm going to try to keep this pretty brief, but basically a strop is a piece of leather glued onto typically a piece of wood, and it has got stropping compound or polishing compound that has been rubbed into it. And so it's usually glued with the nappy side up, the rough side up of the leather, and that holds in the compound as you're sharpening. Okay. And so in order to strop your blade, it's dead simple. And one of the reasons I recommend a straight cutting edge is it's going to be really simple to strop. And so all you do to strop is you're going to set the cutting edge of your blade completely flat on the strop, and then you're just going to drag it away from the cutting edge. Always away, don't push it forward, always away from the cutting edge. Okay? Flip it over and do it the same way coming back. I'm not putting a lot of pressure on it with my finger. I'm just kind of holding it there to make sure, with a very light, even pressure, to make sure the whole blade is in contact with the strop. Okay? And so if you do that every 30 minutes or 60 minutes while you're carving, your knife will stay sharp and you won't have to worry about other sharpening methods. So as you're getting started, don't forget to try to keep your knife sharp. Now, as far as what strop to get to start with, I recommend this flex cut knife strop, they call it. I like it because it's about 3/4 inch thick. So if I set it on my table, my knife has enough room to be up off of the table above it. I like it because it's 2 inches wide, and so most of your blades are going to fit on it. You won't have to worry about having a strop that's too narrow for your blade. And it's got a very thin leather. You want a thin leather, not a thick, spongy leather. And so it's very hard, and it's got a good nap to the leather that's on there to keep the compound in. It is about 20 bucks on Amazon or wherever you find it, maybe even 25. It's a little bit pricey for what it is. And so if you're really looking to save money on a strop, I would recommend just buying a piece of leather and gluing it on a piece of wood. You can find a lot of videos about how to do that. Or just buy the compound. This is the Flex Cut Gold compound. It works great. I have a green compound that I use as well. But buy a stick of compound and you can either make a strop or you can even use the back of a cardboard box. A lot of people use a thin, like cereal box cardboard to do that. So that reminds me, what should you do if your wood carving shop catches on fire? Well, you should strop, drop, and roll. All right, that's it for keeping your knife sharp, and make sure you get a strop to get started. All right, so the last thing that you really should have if you're going to get started whittling is a carving glove. And you might be thinking, do I really need a glove? And the answer is yes. Or the answer is, don't ask me, ask your husband, your wife, your kids, your mom, your dad, whoever. They're all going to say yes, you do. And so a carving glove is going to come in a few different varieties. They're all going to have a weave that includes Kevlar or steel or something to make the weave of the glove cut resistant. And then a lot of them are also going to have some kind of a lining to add a little bit of extra protection. So this one has a leather coating, this one has a rubber coating, this one just has these rubberized dots. All of these will add different levels of protection, but they'll have trade-offs with dexterity. Again, I've got a whole video on gloves. The one that I recommend the most is the cheapest one. You can usually order these on Amazon, $8 for maybe 2 gloves. And I like this one the best because it gives me some flexibility. The ones that are rubberized or have leather, they don't give me as much dexterity, which makes it harder. You can get one with no grip on it. I don't recommend that because it's just too slippery to hold on to the wood when you do that. And this offers, for me, the right balance of doing that. I'll put a link to these gloves in. But the one thing to note about gloves is that they are cut resistant, which means that if your cutting edge goes into them, they'll resist being cut. But they all have a weave, and even the leather or the rubber, they're not puncture proof. You've got gaps in there, and even on the leather and the rubber, your knife that's really sharp can puncture in. So just don't rely on the knife, don't rely on the glove to protect your hand. You still need to be safe about how you're carving, and know that you can cut yourself through the glove. It's not a guarantee, but it's a helpful safety thing. Some people will also use a thumb guard, and so you'll find things like this, which is essentially just the thumb of a glove cut off. And if you're doing a lot of carving where you're carving towards yourself or something, it's not a bad idea. I find them a little bit awkward to use, and so that's up to you if you want to use that or not. But I would definitely recommend you need to have a glove on your hand that you're holding the wood opposite of your knife hand. Okay. Now, the nice thing about these gloves that I'm recommending is that they work on both hands. So if you buy a pair, you've got 2 gloves. And so when one wears out, and they do wear out over time, you've got another one. But that reminds me, I once got a pair of gloves that were both left-hand gloves. On the one hand, it was great, but on the other, it just wasn't right. All right, that's it for what you need. We've got our wood, we've got our knife, we've got a strop, we've got a glove. Now we're ready to get started whittling. Okay, so you've got everything you need. Now we're going to talk about how to whittle. And I'm going to give you your first whittling lesson. All right, so I've got my glove, I got my piece of wood, I got my knife, and I stropped it up. It's nice and sharp. How do I actually whittle? And if you haven't done anything before, I'm just going to give you a couple quick tips to get started. And I'm going to start by showing you what not to do, because most people, when they try to whittle, they end up holding the wood down here, they end up holding their knife down here like this, and they start doing something like this, okay? And that's probably because it worked okay when you were carving a marshmallow stick with a knife by the campfire, right? But you don't have a lot of control over what's happening when you do that. So I'm going to teach you a couple basic cuts to get you started on actually whittling as a hobby. And so the first thing we're going to talk about is how to make a push cut. And so a push cut is what it sounds. I'm just pushing the knife through the wood. Okay. And a few things that I want you to note while I'm doing this. The first thing is I'm using both hands, right? So I'm holding the knife in my right hand, my dominant hand, and I'm pushing it through, but I'm also using my left hand, my non-dominant hand, with my thumb to push the blade. What that does is I can really control how much pressure and how much counter pressure I have on that knife to make sure I'm making a nice controlled cut. I know exactly where it's going. So my thumb is kind of pushing it through. On my right hand, I can kind of give some counter pressure, and that keeps me from, flying off the edge like this. Okay, I always say it's not peeling potatoes. You're not peeling potatoes here. If you're doing this, who knows where the knife is going to go, who you're going to cut, what's going to happen, right? So I want to make controlled cuts. I'm using my left hand thumb to push the blade through. My right hand kind of controls direction, where it's going, the angle of it, and a little bit of counter pressure to make sure I've got lots of control. Okay, so practice that for a little bit. Just practice taking a piece of wood, shaping it down like this, and making nice controlled cuts. You're not going super deep. If you go really deep, your knife will get cut. You'll go too far in. You won't be able to get back out, or you might start breaking it. So when you're practicing, you're just going right along the edge. Practice coming right along the edge. Make nice, clean cuts. And you can almost enjoy just doing that, right? It's just relaxing and enjoyable. Okay. So that's the first type of cut, a push cut that you're going to make. I want to talk about one other type of cut for your first whittling lesson here, and that is going to be a stop cut. So you might be thinking, okay, that's great. I get it. I can shave these things off, but how do I make shapes, right? How do I actually turn a piece of wood like this into something like this? And this is a relatively simple shape, but how do I do that? Well, the answer is stop cuts. So a stop cut is a cut that we make in order to control where another cut stops. And to make a stop cut, I'm going to take my blade, I'm going to push the cutting edge straight into the wood like this. Okay, so I'm just going to lay it straight perpendicular to the grain. I'm going to put it straight in there, and I can use my thumb on my other hand to kind of push it in, maybe even rock it back and forth a little bit. Now the beauty of the stop cut is, now if I carve up to it, my little piece of wood is going to pop right out, right? And that gives me a little bit of a shape. Okay, and I could repeat that. I could put another stop cut there. If I slide this up in here and I extend my stop cut, I can take a bigger piece out like that, right? So all of a sudden, I can start to create shapes out of my wood just by using those two cuts. I can use my push cut to start shaping, and then when I want to separate and I want one part to stick out further than another part, I can use my stop cut. Okay, and my stop cut is the key to separating different shapes and creating different shapes. I can even use it for details. So I can make a long stop cut like this, okay? And then I could carve right up to it like this, and I can carve just a little line, okay? I could carve down to it from another direction, okay? And that would be an example of a V cut because I'm carving to it from both directions, okay? But using that stop cut and using that push cut is going to be the key to making shapes. And this is something that I didn't really think about when I started whittling. I thought, well, how am I going to shape that whole thing? Well, the key to it is stop cuts. So what I would say is get yourself a piece of wood, get yourself your knife, practice making some nice long push cuts, okay? And then try to make some shapes. Make a stop cut, carve up to it. If it doesn't come out, just repeat the cut. Okay, you can repeat the cut a couple times, and you can just start to make some cool patterns. You can start to make some cool shapes, and that's going to be the key to doing things. Now, there are other types of cuts. There are paring cuts, there are chip cuts, there are V cuts, all sorts of different cuts that we could talk about. But just to get you started today, your first whittling lesson, use that stop cut and that push cut. Start practicing with those, and you'll be off to a good start. Okay? All right, so you have everything you need to carve. You've had your first whittling lesson. Now your question is, what do I do next? What do I actually whittle? And this is a common question from beginners. What do I actually do? What do I make? And I'm going to make a few recommendations on generally, and then I'm going to give you a few specific recommendations or ideas of what to carve first. So, first general recommendation is look at carving books. And carving is an analog activity. We do it to unplug and unwind. And I just feel like even in the online digital age, it's just nice to have a book you can sit down and refer to, that you can have out in front of you. You don't have to be on your phone or tablet or computer to watch it. You can just read it and you can have it there with you while you're carving. First book I'm going to recommend is this Complete Starter Guide to Whittling from Fox Chapel Publishing, 24 Easy Projects. Starts off with good info on how to select a knife, how to keep your knife sharp, all of that. And then it's got, a bunch of different projects, and it's going to take you a few different styles of carving. You can see they do pocket knife carving and stick carving, and that's great if you want to give that a try. You can also try, I love this project as a first project. The 5-Minute Owl is a great first project, very much in line with the techniques that I've been showing you and the tools that I've been showing you here. You'll also find things like the 5-Minute Wizard, which is a great first project as well. So this is a good resource. It's a good place to start. It's going to expose you to a lot of different types of whittling and give you some good basic information. The other book that I'd really commend to you is one that I feel like flies under the radar sometime, but if you're looking at all of these different whittling books and wondering where should I start, Whittling Workbook, 14 Simple Projects to Carve from James Ray Miller, again, Fox Chapel Publishing. This is a great book. I love this book because the projects in it really are pretty attainable. This hedgehog is, I think, one of the best projects to start with. He talks about you learn how to carve a point, you learn how to round the piece, and then you get to make these fun textures. That's one of the best ones. But look, these are attainable shapes. These are things that as a beginner that you can do, and you might even surprise yourself and find that you can do some of these characters as well. There's a great intro section. It's going to give you what you need to know about knives and sharpening and different styles of carving, basic cuts, all of that. This is a great reference book and a great set of projects for beginners. I highly recommend that book as well if you're just getting started. The other recommendation is Woodcarving Illustrated magazine, and you can get either the regular magazine or every once in a while they run these special whittling issues, and there's several of them. You can buy these directly from their website now. And I'll put a link to that in the description. But the Whittling magazine is great because it's going to have articles up front on sharpening, on knife selection, and all of the projects are going to be knife-based projects. You're not going to need a lot of other tools to do that. You're going to have to go on their website usually to order those, but those are a great reference. And even, the regular issues, if you want to subscribe or if you want to just buy individual issues from their website, are great references. They'll give you a lot of inspiration. There may be different types of carving in there, right? But what I find is that even if I'm interested in one type of carving, reading about how this has got a pumpkin article because it's a fall issue, but reading about how other people do relief carving or the different projects in here, you'll usually find something that is knife-based and whittling, but you're going to get exposed to a wider variety of ideas. Reading the instructions, even if you don't carve it, always beneficial. So books, magazines, still relevant in the digital age. Of course, online videos are another great option. So if you're looking for online videos to continue your learning, I'd make 2 recommendations to you. The first one is Doug Linker. And if you haven't watched Doug Linker's videos, you'll want to look those up on YouTube. I'll put a link to his channel. And that's how I got started. Doug's got a great series of videos for beginners, but also a huge number of projects, most of them pretty attainable by beginners. I would also commend to you my own videos. I've got a channel and I did a series last year on complete beginner lessons that assume you know nothing and walk you through carving a few projects. So your last big recommendation here is, well, what do I actually do? What do I carve? Books are great. Online videos are great. But what do I actually carve? Well, my first recommendation would be, this is the 5-Minute Wizard. Doug Linker's got a video is the first thing that I carved. Not this one in particular, but but it was the first video I watched, the first thing that I tried to carve. A lot of people got started with this. The most fantastically simple and satisfying carving ever on how to do this 5-minute wizard. So much fun to carve a face and to realize that you can do this. I think it is a great first project. You can go check that out. And then for your next steps, I would humbly submit to you my lessons as well. I've got a series of projects that are designed to get started for a complete beginner. You've never carved anything, and we assume you know nothing, and we walk you through it. The first one is this whittle person. You get to learn how to take a square piece of wood, sorry for my reach, like this, and round it off and carve a sphere on the end of a stick. It's a good practice for shaping, and then you get to make a fun little character. And then the other one that I really love is the simple cactus. And it's just a very simple, easy design and a great first project as well. So you can check those out on my channel. So that's it. We talked about what you need, how to whittle, and what to whittle. I hope that you get started in this hobby. There is so much more to learn, so much more I could talk about. Keep reading, keep watching videos, keep at it, keep practicing. Have fun and happy whittling.